Have you ever heard of a Supreme Court justice who received a red card from the United States? No, it's not a joke. We're talking about Alexandre de Moraes, the man who is now officially blacklisted in the United States. And yes, this means he can no longer enter the US, not even for coffee in Times Square. Now, imagine the scene. You're a Supreme Court justice with complex cases, endless hearings, and suddenly, a foreign country decides you're toxic. Not in the sense of office gossip, but of international financial risk. Pause. Visualize a flashing red frozen stamp on any account you may have outside Brazil. It's real. It's the Magnitsky Act. Why did this happen? The US Treasury Department alleges that Moraes is responsible for an oppressive campaign of censorship, with detentions that violate human rights. In other words, they say, this guy overdid it with the censor button, and we're not going to let it slide. And here's the irony. Moraes has no assets in the US, so you think, okay, it doesn't matter, right? Wrong, because the impact is indirect but devastating. Brazilian banks watching every transaction as if it were a scene from a thriller.
Let's break down the immediate consequences. First, frozen assets. Any account Moraes had in the US is automatically blocked. Even if he doesn't have any, Brazilian companies that deal with American banks are on alert. Every international transfer becomes a suspenseful experience. Will I be sanctioned too? Second, visa revocations. Moraes and his family can no longer enter the US. Imagine, an international meeting is scheduled and the door is closed, literally. Third, banking repercussions. Banks, investors, and companies are on high alert. Even the BNDES said we're fine, but everyone knows this is just the beginning of the financial tension. Now, let's look at the reactions. Moraes said, I have no assets in the US, I'm carrying on as normal. Experts? Some say political sanction with no legal basis. Others, interference in national sovereignty. And the international media? They watch every step as if it were an episode of a drama series, but with real numbers and documents. And of course, the diplomatic crisis. One country sanctions another country's Supreme Court justice. The result? Instant bilateral tension. Lula calls emergency meetings, ministers publish firm statements, the media follows every move. It's like watching a political thriller live. But the funniest part, or tragic depending on your perspective, Moraes is now toxic to international banks and investors while he continues to work at the Supreme Court as normal. Imagine the scene. Is every decision being read by American analysts as if it were a global red alert?
So, what's the big question? Can a justice operate freely when a superpower decides he poses an international risk? Or have we set a precedent for all judges and politicians in the country? Let's reframe. Up to this point, you might be thinking, okay, Moraes is the target of sanctions, but what about me? The answer? Everything. This case is a vivid example of how domestic decisions reverberate globally, affecting the economy, diplomacy, and the perception of sovereignty. Now, a visual pause. Imagine bank charts, sanctions lists, and flashing red stamps, all linked to a court decision in Brasilia. It's almost comical, if it weren't serious. And remember the callback. The same toxic that can't enter the US continues to judge cases that affect domestic politics. Every ruling, every court order now has international repercussions. To conclude with irony, in the end, who is truly toxic? The minister or the system that sanctions without even needing coffee? Because in the Brazil of 2025, politics isn't just domestic. It's global, digital, and hilariously unpredictable. So the next time someone says, politics doesn't affect me, remember, a click in Washington can redefine assets, travel, and even court decisions in Brasilia. And this is the story of Alexandre de Moraes, the Magnitsky Act, and the silent war with the United States. It's not a serial drama, it's political reality, and a bit of unintentional comedy.
Please subscribe to the channel and leave your like.